Mr. Speaker, we're living in troubled times these days. We're in the midst of one of the most serious economic recessions since the Great Depression. You were in Congress when President Reagan inherited a recession that, while different, the one facing us today was broad and deep. What do you believe is the single most important principle that Ronald Reagan stood for as president in times like this that would serve us well to consider today?
I think the most important principle actually was to have principles. Ronald Reagan believed clearly that there were certain patterns that would work, that lowering the cost of government, reducing regulation, cutting taxes, and exciting the spirits of the American entrepreneur, the American people, rebuilding civic confidence and optimism that you can get things done. And I think it was that package. I remember vividly, I was a second-term congressman, and we were all working very hard to get it through and to help him with the bill, which ultimately he signed in August. And I think that it was that steady commitment to principle that made such a huge difference, and that he understood and believed in the American people and knew that his job was to liberate them, not to liberate government.
On the same topic of the current economic crisis, there are those who would blame the Republican Party, and specifically Ronald Reagan, and his faith in the free market and deregulation policies. How would you answer them?
Well, I would say, first of all, there have been a heck of a lot of useless and expensive regulations. We have a 200-person office that does nothing but look at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two big housing institutions. They have $62 million a year to spend, and apparently, even though that's been their only job for 18 years, they could never figure out what these two institutions were doing. We passed a Sarbanes-Oxley bill that adds about $3.8 million to the cost of every new startup that wants to become a public company annually, and extends the length of time it takes to go public from 7 to 12 years, as a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley taught me. And it achieves nothing. It did not warn us about a single one of the problems we're faced with. We have a Securities and Exchange Commission that is supposed to have regulated Madoff, and Madoff apparently was involved in $50 billion of a Ponzi scheme, despite the fact that they were supposed to be watching him. So I would start and say you better overhaul the government as well as talk about the markets. And in the long run, I have no doubt, and I think Reagan would have had no doubt, that the power of you as a customer in the market is dramatically better than the weakness you have as a client trying to deal with a bureaucracy.
President Obama has stated previously that he feels President Reagan was a transformative figure in American politics. You were a member of Congress during the length of President Reagan's term. Do you view President Reagan as a transformative president, and if so, how?
Well, I think you could argue that he is the second most effective president of the 20th century, along with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Ronald Reagan, in my mind, I campaigned with him in the 70s, I served with him in the 80s, I've studied him ever since. Ronald Reagan came into office to do three things: rebuild the American economy by cutting taxes and regulations and liberating entrepreneurs, renew American civic spirit and culture so we were proud to be American again, and defeat the Soviet Empire. Ronald Reagan left office having renewed the economy, rebuilt our spirit as a people, and the Soviet Empire disappeared. Now, I don't know of any president in history who had as clear a set of goals and as definable a set of achievements. And I think that is an amazing achievement.
There are those in the media who are promoting the idea that the Reagan Revolution is over. Do you think that that's true?
Well, there are those in the media who wish that the entire American experiment was over. They'd like us to become a French socialist society, eliminate everybody who's an entrepreneur, punish those who are successful, and live cheerfully and happily in a bureaucratic state, drinking our wine and not complaining. I don't think that'll happen. This has been for 402 years, from the time the colonists first stopped at Cape Henry and erected a cross to thank God for having gotten across the Atlantic and then went up to found Jamestown. For 402 years, this has been the most dynamic, the most entrepreneurial, the most work-oriented society in the world. I suspect 10 years from now, this will be the most dynamic, the most entrepreneurial, and the most work-oriented society in the world. And I suspect our left-wing friends will once again be frustrated.
Do you think the American people wish for the leadership of Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, and I think they wish the leadership of Ronald Reagan. I think the American people hope that President Obama is going to succeed. I think the American people want to have presidents who are strong, clear, disciplined, and have principle. And that's why I've said to some of my friends, no one should wish that the President of the United States fails, no matter who the president is. We may have to oppose their policies. But one of the great lessons of Ronald Reagan was that he was a patriot, and he put this country first. He put it way ahead of party, and he believed in trying to arouse in each of us the patriotism that makes America possible. And so I think the average American would love it. I don't know if you've noticed the data at Gallup, but in the last 2 years, the president has now risen to tie Abraham Lincoln as the most effective American president. Now, I think that tells you something about where the American people are with Ronald Reagan.
You have produced a documentary that we're going to see tonight, Ronald Reagan, Rendezvous with Destiny. In the process of creating this film, did you learn anything new about our 40th president? Why is this project so important to you, and what do you hope to accomplish with this film?
Well, I think Callista and I had several big revelations. And let me say that filming here was one of the really exciting moments in the film because, to film at Air Force One, to be able to see all the different things that you've assembled here about President Reagan and about Nancy Reagan, it's a remarkable institution and does a great job. I think that when we filmed at Pointe du Hoc and we're there standing where the president stood, and in the movie, every time I see the movie, I get tears because the moment where he is reading the young woman's letter to her father is just so and the president gets tears. I mean, it's so overwhelming emotionally. And we were very fortunate when we were there. They have a brand new museum at Omaha Beach, and they allowed me to be part of lowering the flag at the end of the day and folding the flag. And it was my dad was a career soldier for 27 years in the infantry, and it was a very sobering moment. The other thing was, it was very interesting. Both Lech Walesa, who we interviewed in Gdansk, and Václav Havel, who we interviewed in Prague, both said President Reagan's words, the power of his moral leadership, were decisive in making them believe that they were no longer alone. And that was one of the real keys to the change in Eastern Europe.
One final question. What would you tell our guests who visit the Reagan Library?
I think I would say 3 things. First, relax and enjoy it. It's just one of the great places in America to soak up Americana, and Ronald Reagan was a remarkable person with a long career doing many different things. Second, look around you at the ability of Americans to get things done, and look at Reagan's long life, born into a time when commercial radio did not yet exist, when movies had no sound, when color did not exist, and ultimately speaking to the nation about the Challenger disaster on live television in color. In his lifetime, he witnessed the kind of technology that helped make him an optimist. And finally, just, read the various things, look at the various films, and pick up the key language. This is one of the great educators in American history. Not a great communicator, he's a great educator. He thought deeply, he thought profoundly, and he said things with extraordinary capacity to educate. And if you spend a day here and you just open yourself up to it, you don't have to work at it. This place will teach you things that you'll think about the rest of your life.
Okay, I have one question because you brought something up that I think is interesting. The kids that we have today that come into our Discovery Center, which you were in today, or through the museum, they're 5th, 7th, 8th graders, sometimes 11th and 12th graders. They have really no full understanding or comprehension of Ronald Reagan or what he stood for. They see the Berlin Wall and they go, what's that piece of whatever? And, they see the Oval Office, yeah, I see that on the West Wing. What would you tell the youth of today about their experience at the Reagan Library?
I would say that you will in your lifetime face great challenges, and you will see things change dramatically. And if you come here, you will learn how somebody who was once your age lived a life of leadership, of learning, and of change. And you can take those lessons and you can apply them to your life until you become Ronald Reagan's age.
Thank you very much. That was great.